Ever have second thoughts? This is how the Brahms Fourth Symphony begins. Main theme, right away. No introductory material of any kind. It's unusual, actually, a bit like beginning a letter with no salutation. It takes a confident composer to begin a 40-minute romantic symphony this way, which, of course, Brahms was. Or was he? His good friend Joseph Joachim felt that this beginning couldn't work. Some kind of introduction, he said, was required to ease the listener into this delicate world. And so Brahms changed his mind and added this. But as you can see, he changed his mind again and crossed them out decisively. Back on page 1, you can also see that wasn't the only place Brahms had second thoughts. Here are significant changes he made to the viola part already in measure 6. I own quite a number of facsimiles, photographic copies of composers' autograph manuscripts. They can often tell us a lot about composers' creative processes, especially inveterate revisers like Beethoven and Mahler when their changes are visible on the page. But we can also learn a lot about the creative process even of a composer like Mozart, who revised very seldom. Looking at the autograph manuscript of his final symphony, the Jupiter Symphony, one finds almost no adjustments at all. That doesn't mean he didn't make any, but if he did, we have no record of them. One of the few changes we do see is almost laughably minor. It comes here in the recapitulation of the first movement, this moment. This note in the bass, he changes from an F flat to an E natural. They're the same note, or for all practical purposes they are. We search throughout this Jupiter Symphony manuscript for any sign of hesitation or doubt of one of the most sophisticated and perfect works in all the literature. And this is about the best we can come up with, changing an F flat to an E natural. Mozart seems to have composed whole works in his mind before he even first would set pen to paper to copy them out. We know this because we can track how he went about writing. He would typically write the bass line and the top voice from the beginning of a movement all the way to the end, and only later go back and fill in the other voices. How could you possibly do that if you didn't already know what the whole would sound like, how all those pieces would fit together? Do you see here, in the manuscript of the slow movement of the Hafner Symphony, how the ink on the top and bottom lines, the first violin and the bass, are a different shade from the other lines? That's because he did them first, and by the time he went back to fill in all the other voices, he had resharpened his quill. And then there's the Mozart Requiem. The manuscript of this work gives us an unusually vivid look into how Mozart went about composing. Many unfinished works provide a special look into the creative process. If only a little bit is written down, we learn what a composer did first. And if a work is almost finished but not quite, we see what a composer typically left to the end. In the Mozart Requiem, Mozart worked as he typically did for the last 20 years of his life. In almost every case, he wrote out all the vocal material first, along with a bass line, and then, or perhaps simultaneously, the top line, usually the first violin, and then filled in the other voices. When we get to the Domine Jesu Christe, the beginning of the third part of the Requiem Mass, we see only music for the chorus with a bass line, all written out from beginning to end in their entirety, and a few notes here and there for the violins. For the Lacrimosa, most people are shocked to see how little he actually completed. 2 introductory bars for the upper strings, and the first 6 choral bars only. And that's all Mozart wrote. Those who have tried to complete the Requiem have had to learn what they could about Mozart's creative process in order to figure out what might have been. In a future interlude, principal cellist of the Boston Landmarks Orchestra, Aaron Zelkowitz, and I will explore a work together by one of the major league world champion revisers of all time, Ludwig van Beethoven.